And obviously that kind of leads quite well onto Checo. Now, he's had an interesting season, I think, because in terms of the global picture, I think the entire season, I think he's been exactly where he needs to be. He's still fighting for second in the championship. Yeah. You know, Max is running away with it, whatever. But when you actually look at where, you know, there's been this whole like rhetoric, especially since like Spa and the fact that Checo has dropped off, like that gap is back to 6 tenths, 5 tenths, maybe even more. But he is still fighting for second in the championship. He's doing exactly what Red Bull need him to do. But it's very... What I think is important is, was that first half of the season an aberration where, actually not even the first half, let's be honest, like up until Canada, I think obviously, you know, again, in Baku, he outqualified Max in the race. Max passed him like he was, you know, driving like Checo was driving a Williams. So was that first like third of the season an aberration? And is that, you know, we're going to look back at that as that was like the purple patch, or is this now the norm going forward, that like that's it?
I think that's a really tough question to answer, because I think the nature of that discussion goes back to something I looked at in detail and something that Max talked about a little bit in the press, or his dad even made mentions to it. He said, and then Pirelli even talked about this, the 2022, the 18-inch Pirellis have very weak front tires, and it's taken teams a long time to figure out, how do I
add a lot of understeer at the front, especially.
Exactly. So how do we, what do we do with aero? What do we do with the car setup, which allows us to put front end in the car at these low speed turn ins? Max's biggest gripe was in Monaco. You know, he was like, the car doesn't have enough front end for me to be confident to lean on the car and push it into the corner. Checo likes that kind of car. That's also one of the things that Checo can do, which has made him, you know, historically, Checo's excellent at go fast and save tires. He's done it.
Performance engineer at Force India. I mean, that's where he made his name. Is like, I still remember, even actually in the Sauber days, Monza 2012, like he was able to just take tires. You give him a tire, you tell him a lap, no problem.
I can do it. He's like, I'll go as slow as I need to go, but I will not go any slower. And that's what he did over Hulkenberg when he was at Force India. Hulkenberg would end up going too slow. It's like, oh, I didn't know. And Checo just was really good at sensing that and keeping it. I'm not going to overheat it. I'm going to keep it in the window.
But I think that setup, and my kind of theory is that we both know, I mean, all of the chats that I've had with you, the team don't go to the drivers and say, you know, right, Checo, what do you want from the car? Actually, do you know what? We don't care about you. We don't want to know. They don't go to Max and go, right, what do you want? Perfect. That's what we're going to do. Checo, go away. They don't do that. But I think what's happened, that car was a lot closer to the Ferrari at the beginning of the season when it was a lot more closer to Checo's driving style, you know, again, a bit more understeer. Max couldn't quite get that front turn working. But as the car has got closer to Max, I think that aids in performance. I think where they're finding the performance gains and the downforce gains, naturally, I think Max is just able to get more out of it. And that's the gap that we're seeing. So I think they probably could make a car that's a bit closer to both drivers. But again, I think it would be slower to where it is right now.
100%.
And the performance of a car is judged by what the quickest driver can do. They're the ones that point out the dynamic limitations.
Yeah. And I think that's fair. Like I don't really feel like they're developing the car for Max. They're literally adding performance to the car, and if you can add performance to the car and he can add a bit more front end, he can live with a car that's a little bit more unstable, moving a little bit more on the entry, and he can trust that and be confident on that car, whereas Checo needs that super stable car. But when you have no matter who you talk to about what car you're talking about, whoever can drive a more unstable car will go faster, you know, invariably. Like, yes, it may be more difficult on the tires, but if you can deal with that, then you can leave it up to the driver to control the car. It's like, I can put it there and go fast when I need to, but I can also look after the tires. It's not like it's snapping out from under me. So he's got a pointy car, which is pretty predictable. He can go fast. Checo needs probably a bit more stability.
And I think it's that gap to Ferrari. Like, I think you've got two choices here. Make a car that's, you know, where Checo and Max are a little bit closer, but naturally that brings them back to Ferrari.
Yeah.
Or you make a car that's, again, not suited 100% towards Max, but just he's able to access more of the performance from what they're trying to add to the car, and that gives you a more dominant car.
Yeah.
Now that comes at the cost of Checo being a little bit slower. Again, we're talking 6 tenths to half a second in quali. That's back to Gasly, Albon levels, but look at the season they're having since Max has been a lot more comfortable in the car. What are you going to take? A bunch of close races between you and Ferrari, or Max domination? And if that leaves Checo half a second behind, you've just had 5 wins in a row. What are you going to complain about?
Yeah, but I guess that brings the other question into play: is what if you weren't running away with the championship? What if you're like, we'd be a lot better in the championship if Checo was finishing, fourth behind Max, always finishing third instead of finishing sixth and Max finishing third. So that's an interesting compromise, and they don't really need to worry about it when they're that much on the lead. Now, if they were on the back foot, you would probably be exerting more pressure on your other driver.
I think there'd be even more of a spotlight on the whole, this car is more tailored towards Max, but because he's running away with it, results speak for themselves, and the results say that Red Bull are doing the best with both drivers. They're doing the best job possible. So,
who's your best pairing in a car? Red Bull. Do you go with two A tier drivers or two S tier drivers? Or do you do an A and a B?
We've seen throughout Formula 1. Listen, I love Leclerc and Sainz. They're close. They can really mix it up. I love Russell and Hamilton. Dominant pairings always come when there's one, when you have a Max Verstappen, Lewis Hamilton, Michael Schumacher, and you have that
wingman.
And Checo, I think Checo also, as frustrated as he might be, he's got enough experience, and he was out of Formula 1 at the end of 2020. He did not have a seat. So Red Bull came to his, they came to him. So he would have been out of Formula 1. He's at a top team. And I think you have to have almost that perspective where, listen, I'm not going to be as quick as Max. I've got to accept that. Just obviously you hate it as a driver. You can never, I know people say you can never think like that.
Yeah.
But you've got to know that you're not going to be as quick as Max. But on the days when things go wrong for Max, I might have the car to pick up the pieces, get podiums, maybe even a Grand Prix win. And I mean, if he doesn't accept that, go slum it in the midfield. Maybe a sixth or a fifth place would be like a podium for you then. But
I don't think we're done with Checo in terms of his level. I think it's an interesting year for him. And if the tires change in the right direction for him next year, it sounds like they're trying to take the tires the opposite way. They're trying to add more front end for the next set of Pirellis, but maybe they can come up with something for him. Because for sure, they're not just being like, what, Checo, piss off. They're trying to get the most out of the car for both the drivers right now. Yeah. They're adding performance and Max can kind of, like we've seen it in the last couple of years, Max can kind of drive anything. Checo, what do you need? Because if we add what Checo needs to the car, as long as it doesn't make the car slower, Max will go faster with that as well. But what you as a team would like to see is the gap between them close, and you're 1-2ing those races. And like you said, when the driver that's at the top of the championship, something happens, the other driver is always there to pick up the pieces.
Exactly. So I think, to me, if it would be Max and Checo for the long term. Unless next year you can see that Checo is losing it mentally, which I don't think. As long as he has a sense of perspective of where he is in his career, what team he's in a top team.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like I said, if Checo is not happy, and I know he's not going to be happy, would you rather slum it in a midfield team fighting for fifth, or on a good day, or would you rather just you're at a top team, you're at the top. It is what it is.
Life is good.
Exactly, life is good, even if you're not going to be fighting for race wins, and let's be honest, championships as well. But again, I think it's that sense of perspective, and if he's going to be able to handle it, but we're going to see, I think, next year.